Hi there, it's John from itsmorethanjustgaming.com. Welcome. Today, or now, we're going on to our third video on the Dragonfire game, the Dungeons & Dragons deck building game. This video will go over the differences between the Jumpstart adventure and the basic game itself, where you would play as a party of adventurers going through a specific dungeon or playing a specific adventure. I'm not going to rehash all of the turn sequence that was already covered in video number 2 in the Jumpstart. This video is going to focus on differences. I do need to actually, however, add in a sort of like a correction based on the combat that was presented in the Jumpstart video. I did actually put a notation on screen, but the notation was the best I could do at the time because I've got limited time to record these videos due to the fact that this is alone. The rules are a little bit vague in the way that they're written. They do not explicitly state at any point, one way or the other, that you can or you cannot attack creatures that are in front of other characters. I was assuming when I read the rules that you basically fight the creature in front of you and you need to use assist cards to help attack on other people's turns other creatures. However, there are a number of allusions in the rules that are quite well buried and relatively vague that suggest, in actual fact, you can attack any creature that is in the same location as you. So, for instance, the adventuring environment or one of the location cards, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in this video. That makes sense. So, for instance, if there's nothing standing in front of the wizard's already... their foe's already been dealt with, it makes sense that they can then send a lightning bolt to the array of things in front of the warrior, or a magic missile to hammer down lots of things in front of the fighter, not the warrior, I should say. The only exceptions to this is if your characters are in two different locations, you can't... so the adventuring area or a location encounter, you can't actually attack a creature that is in another location, as it were. However, I will speak about how you can assist people that are in different locations later. I should say, this is an assumption on my part that you can attack other creatures that are in front of other characters, because I've not been able to find any decent FAQs as yet, although I was searching for them when I was half asleep, so maybe they'll exist, and maybe they don't just yet because it's a relatively new game. Either way, it's my assumption, and it will be the way that I play it, that you can actually attack any creature that is in the same environment as you, so the adventuring environment or a location encounter as you, whether there is one in front of you or not. If you ignore the ones that are in front of you, they're going to hit you at the end of the combat turn anyway, which kind of mimics Dungeons & Dragons, the game, where they get an attack of opportunity. And if there's nothing in front of you, like I said with the wizard, which makes sense, or the rogue, it makes sense that the rogue would go in and backstab the things in front of the fighters, and the wizard would hurl in their magic spells. So, with that clarification, and I hope that was clear. I know that it's a little bit weird that I'm just adding it in now in video 3 when I probably should have figured it out before video 1 and covered it when I went through combat encounters in the anatomy of cards and events and how you deal with combat in video 1. But it is what it is. Like I say, I've got this on loan and I've had limited time to prepare for it. So I hope that's clear. Again, please don't use these videos as a substitute for the rules, but as an aid to understanding the rules. So, let's get on with the standard adventure game that is not the Jumpstart adventure. The first thing to discuss is the adventure environment, which I mentioned just a moment ago. Now, strictly speaking, you can use this in the Jumpstart adventure because it has no mechanical effect on play in the Jumpstart, or rather it has no mechanical Jumpstart in the Jumpstart. Basically, the adventure environment here is just a card that's graphic, and it's actually double-sided, so you've got like a spooky town there or a dungeon on the other side, and that is where you put the standees for your characters. So let's say you've got one of each class. That's a rogue there because it's got the red deception. You've got a fighter there, that's the black marshal. You've got green devotion for your cleric, and you've got blue arcane for your wizard there. So you pop them there, and that basically means that all those heroes are effectively in the same area. And based on what I was saying a moment ago, whatever the rogue is fighting, the fighter can fight as well, the mage can fight as well, and the cleric can fight as well. The reason that you have one of these is when you're going through the encounters deck, sometimes a character will get a location. I'll just pop one up just now. So there's choke point. Let's say the rogue actually drew as their encounter choke point. The rogue would move to the choke point, basically. The standee would no longer be... I beg your pardon. The rogue is no longer in the same location as the fighter, the cleric, and the mage. And that is why you use the adventure environment. Each adventure, or each game in Dragonfire is a Dungeons & Dragons adventure. And I'm going to use the Dungeon Crawl adventure card as an example of how that works in a game. So there is a campaign where 5 of these are actually chained together. And in the core set, I think there's 2 unattached adventures. And the Dungeon Crawl is recommended as something that you can play over and over for additional XP and whatnot, and there are ways to increase the level of it as well. But the adventure card tells you what you need to know about the adventure, how to set it up, and the encounter. So basically there's flavor text here. The townsfolk are terrified, monstrous inhabitants from the nearby dungeon, blah blah blah. We need some heroes to go in and kill them. Adventure setup. Use Dungeon 1 as the primary encounter deck. So that was the encounter deck that you use in the Quick Start Adventure. So it's like level 1 monsters, basically. Or I say level 1, but yeah, level 1's about right. And you have a secondary encounter deck that is Dungeon 2. So these are just a bit tougher. Let's see if you can see that. I'll pop that on top of the card just now. So there's a green slot there. Actually, let's move that over to the side. And it says encounters at the start of each scene, and that actually is a good point. The adventure is made up of 3 scenes here. And it says at the start of each scene, reveal encounters as indicated in the chart below. First reveal encounters from the secondary deck equal to the Dragonfire level. I'll come to that just shortly. Then if you still need to draw more encounters, reveal the remaining encounters from the primary deck. So basically, the higher the Dragonfire level, the more likely you are to get dungeon level 2, because that's the secondary deck. In the scene 1, you get the same number of encounters as there are characters, so just 1 encounter in front of each character. And these can be creatures or they can be locations, so the choke point that I showed you earlier is one of the encounters you might find. In scene 2, it's number of characters plus 1. In scene 3, it's number of characters plus 2. Now, that's for a standard 4-player game. If you play a 5-player game, you add an additional monster from the primary deck, so deck 1, to all of these. So it's a little bit harder because there's 5 of you. And if it's a 6-player adventure, you add an additional card, but instead of being from the primary deck, it's from the secondary deck. So even in round 1, you'll get 1 monster from each from the primary deck, but there will also be a secondary monster, which is probably just a little bit tougher in there. And that's basically to represent the fact that you've got more numbers, so you've got a little bit more threat to deal with. But you can probably handle it. Okay, I forgot to mention, when you're adding in additional cards, additional monsters, because of party size, you don't get gold for them, so it suggests you basically cover them with a generic token over the gold value to represent that it's an extra monster, but there's no gold attached to it. I've not found a use for these tokens yet, so that's what I'm assuming what they're for. Currently I've got 2 of them on the secondary encounter deck and 1 of them on the primary encounter deck, so that I don't forget. Now I want to talk about the Dragonfire cards. Dragonfire cards are story mechanics in the dungeon. Basically, they are effects that happen that might tell you a little bit about the encounter you're having, whether the orcs are about to frenzy, or if they're healing up, or if bad luck's about to happen, or if there's a cave-in. The way the game works, you've set up the adventure, you've set up your cards, you've got your equipment packs, the encounters have been dealt out for scene 1, you then actually start scene 1, and scenes are made up of rounds. Each round, players get 1 turn to try and attack things. So you can attack the things in front of you, or you can attack the things in front of other people. That is your turn. At the start of a round, before anyone gets a turn, you uncover the first Dragonfire card. In this case, it's Haunted. And there are some flavour text that you read out. And then below the line, there are some instructions. And there are symbols here. This symbol here is an egg timer, which basically means deadfall, and that means when you discard this card, you read out, resolve this text. The next line is deadfall and Dragonfire level 5 or higher, which means you don't. If the Dragonfire level is 5 or higher, then you resolve this one instead of that one. At the end of a round, when all the players have had a turn, you discard a card, the Dragonfire card, put it in the discard pile and reveal the next one. And then you do the same. The interesting thing is, the Dragonfire level that I keep talking about is the number of cards in your Dragonfire discard pile. So currently, the Dragonfire level is now 1 at the end of round 1. The Dragonfire level has an effect on the Dragonfire cards, because this one here has 6+. Once, if this comes out when it is 6+, then you would resolve that. This squiggle here represents a continuous effect. So long as this card is in play, this is always in play. I'm going to actually just have a look at one of the encounters just now as well, because it makes a difference. This is one of the Dungeon 1 encounters, the Chul. It is a sort of like a crabby Cthulhu type beast, which is worth 9 gold when you fight it, and it does 2 damage and it's quite hard to kill. The thing is, if the Dragonfire level is 4 or higher, so if there are 4 cards in the Dragonfire pile, it gets +1 attack strength. However, it only gets that bonus if when this card, the Chul card, comes out, there are 4 discard cards in the Dragonfire discard pile. It doesn't increase in power if the discard pile goes up to 4. It doesn't increase in strength. If it comes out at strength 2, it stays at strength 2. If it comes out and there are 7 cards in the discard pile, it gets +2 to its attack strength, to represent the fact that the players have actually been doing quite a lot of turns and things are getting tougher and it's harder to kill them. So that's what the Dragonfire level does. And like I said, you've got the sort of like the squiggly thing means continuous, that means Dragonfire level +6, and this means the egg timer means deadfall. When you end a scene, as in and that is when the players defeat all the monsters in front of them. That shouldn't be impossible. The players should be able to defeat all the monsters, although only one player needs to be standing by the end of it. When all the monsters that are out are defeated, all the encounters are defeated, you take the Dragonfire card that's on the top and you bury it rather than discard it. So basically, when the players end the scene, the Dragonfire level doesn't go up. And that's a sort of bonus for the players. Okay, so some of the encounters in the standard adventures are locations, and they represent your characters going off into different spaces. So in this case, the fighter has been given the choke point location, and I've moved the standee from the adventure environment into that location. Now the location functions almost identically as a creature encounter. It has levels that you can destroy, it does damage if it persists until the end of the turn, it has gold values. So long as the location is open, someone has to remain there until it's defeated. It also has a limit of 2 people can be in the location, and it has its own special rules. Now here's the thing about locations and the adventure environment. Location, adventure environment. You can only affect encounters in the same area as you. So if you're in the adventure environment and it's your turn, you can affect monsters facing you and monsters facing the other people in the adventure environment. You cannot affect those in locations. If you are in a location, you can affect monsters facing you and monsters facing others in that location, but not monsters facing those in adventure environments. Here's the thing. You can assist when, say for instance, it is the fighter's turn and they're needing a little bit of help. If there are characters in the adventure environment that have assist cards, they can assist from the adventure environment into location. And if the characters in the adventure environment are having trouble and the warrior has assist cards, the warrior can help from the location to the adventure environment. You can basically go from, you can do an assist from a location to adventure environment and an assist from adventure environment to the location. You cannot, however, assist from one location to another because that's effectively too far away. Okay, so a scene ends when all monsters are defeated or when all players are defeated. And I couldn't find anything explicitly about that, but if all the players are defeated, I'm assuming that's game over. You're all knocked unconscious and then the monsters kill you. It doesn't say that in the rules anywhere I could find, but that makes sense. However, let's assume that the players are always going to get to the end of the scene by defeating the last monster, even if it's only one of them. Like I said earlier, you'd bury the Dragonfire card so that the Dragonfire level doesn't go up. And then you go into what's called a short rest. A short rest happens at the end of every scene, assuming the player's won. You remove exhausted tokens from all but unconscious characters. Everyone heals 1 level, so if you're stunned or unconscious, you get back to 1 hit point. And if you were stunned or unconscious, you can draw 2 cards at that point. If you were unconscious when you went into the short rest, you're still going into the next scene as exhausted, but at least you're not unconscious. You just need to hope that you'll keep your health high enough not to be knocked unconscious again. Then, starting with the player to the left of the person who ended the scene, each player may purchase 1 item from the market. You may not purchase things that have purchase requirements, so for instance, you must have already played a red card this turn to buy this thing. And then you set up the next scene. If you completed the last scene in the adventure, you win. So you would then check the adventure card for experience points, and then you check the rulebook for magic items. And that's it. That is how you would do the basic adventure, or the standard adventure, in Dragonfire. It's not that different, it's not that complicated. I've made a bit of a hash of the adventure environment to the locations, but I'm hoping you understand. The Dragonfire one is not that complex once you get your head around it. And I'll talk about experience points and magic items in the next video in a little bit more detail. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.